I've had a wonderful life. I've had thousands of friends, and I've had an exciting and adventurous and gratifying existence.
A life well lived. Today, the nation honors the life and legacy of former President Jimmy Carter, the 39th president and only president from the state of Georgia. We are live from the Carter Center today, as well as his hometown of Plains, Georgia. Good midday to you. I'm Aisha Howard. We are so glad you are here with us. Jimmy Carter, the Georgia peanut farmer who ascended to the governor's mansion and then the presidency, died at his home in Plains on Sunday. He rose to worldwide fame, but remained close to his roots in Plains. That is where we find 11 Alive's political team reporter Zach Merchant, who is there for us now. Zach, what has it been like there? We see this huge banner behind you, just really marking what he meant to that small town.
Well, you're right. You know, we've been here for most of the night, most of the morning now. Then it was dark, it was quiet, it was somber. Now that the sun is up, you're starting to get the sense as you talk to people that they are getting the sense that the eyes of history are again pointed squarely right here at Plains, Georgia. 3 people we talked to today, they told us that they didn't even have any plans to be here today, but after they heard the news of President Carter's death, they rerouted their cross-country road trips to pay their respects to the 39th president and the small town he called home for a century. It was here in Plains where he was born. He raised a family. He mounted a remarkable political climb from a state senator all the way to the presidency, and yesterday died. One woman, Tamara Keel, who was traveling from Indiana to Florida, said she felt like she just had to see this place to believe it.
Something drew me here this morning, and I just wanted to see where this man grew up and what kept drawing him back. And you have to be here to understand it, I think. I wouldn't have understood it if I hadn't come.
And Zach, we know that you've covered Georgia politics all year, and all of us felt it. This was just a really contentious election season overall. But let's talk more about how did President Carter's legacy really impact things now in 2024?
I think in some ways we saw on the campaign trail a little bit of what we're seeing and feeling here in Plains today. Of course, it was not universal, but over the course of this election season and even more broadly over the recent years, especially as President Carter got older, you saw a pretty broad coalition of people with very different political viewpoints come to a sort of common perspective, a common understanding that they really respected President Carter's work, particularly what he did after he left the Oval Office, his relentless humanitarian work with Habitat for Humanity, with the Carter Center, his work at his beloved Baptist church here in Plains, where he was a Sunday school teacher. We talked to folks here today just in the last 30, 45 minutes, and we talked to them in part about politics. President Carter, after all, was a politician. When we talked to them, we saw them do something we don't see a lot when they're talking about politics. They smiled. That was President Carter's impact. We're live in Plains, Georgia. Zach Merchant, 11 Alive News.
All right, Zach, thank you. 100 years old and a life well lived, and that is a reflection here in Atlanta at the Carter Center. That is where we find 11 Alive's Liza Lucas. Liza, we know the Carter Center was such an integral part of the former president's legacy. People have been coming out there to pay their respects. Tell us, what are you seeing there?
Well, this was a man that certainly inspired, and that inspiration will very much continue, as Zach alluded to, with the work that manifests here at the Carter Center every single day. Now, the memorial behind me has been a focal point for a lot of people throughout the course of the morning who've been taking a moment to pause, reflect, maybe take a quick photo, and just think about the impact, that humanitarian impact, the public servant aspect of the 39th president and his life and legacy. In fact, we actually had a chance to speak with Craig Withers, who's VP of Operations here at the Carter Center. He spoke with the former president's many chapters of life, whether working as a farmer or in the White House. Withers saying no matter what, former President Carter always strived to do his best and wanted others to do the same. Carter's underlying principle, Withers says, was to always treat others with dignity.
And it didn't matter to him whether you were the highest ranking head of state in a country or you were a subsistence farmer at a remote community. He felt everybody should be treated with dignity, and that by doing so you could empower them and inspire them to do other things.
And now that all carries on. That mission presses on, particularly for those who worked alongside Carter and knew him best. Aisha.
All right, Liza, so we know Carter's passing is really a moment especially felt here in his native state. But in the meantime, we do know that condolences are coming in from really all across the world. That was such a big part of his legacy, being a world leader.
Exactly. In fact, in just the last couple of hours since we were first reporting to you, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has now weighed in. He has praised Carter for his integrity and his compassion. Pope Francis also issuing a statement in the last hour or so, especially noting the former president's deep Christian faith, of course, which is well known throughout Georgia and across the world. Sending it back to you.
All right, Liza, thank you. And President Jimmy Carter's funeral services are expected to be held January 9th. We are still waiting to learn about the final details here, but we do know his casket will travel to Atlanta from planes. He will lie in repose at the Carter Center. He will then be taken to Washington, D.C. to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. After his state funeral, he will be taken back to Plains, where he will be buried alongside his wife, Rosalind, following a private service there.